Today I have gathered 10 artists in total, including myself, to create an entire cast of characters without communicating with each other. So basically, we all agreed upon a general genre setting for this story to take place, and then I assigned everybody character archetypes to design, and we all did that individually without communicating with each other. So we have no idea what the entire cast of characters looks like. We only had one singular prompt to go off, which was a high fantasy apocalyptic world where the general vibe would be a medieval high fantasy apocalypse where the zombies have been infected via some kind of magic. And that was all the information everybody had going into their designs. So let's jump right into it, starting with... Yes, hello again. I'm doing the protagonist. So what I decided on was this prince whose kingdom has fallen after the apocalypse started, and everyone sort of turned their back on the royals. They don't really care about that anymore. Despite the royal family being completely irrelevant now, he still feels that it is his duty to save his kingdom and his people and to restore it to its former glory. Now, whether that be loyalty to his people or like a desire to be an important figure again, or both, I imagine him sort of like very coddled growing up as a prince, but he's still got that sort of stereotypical princely nobility that he's been taught since birth. But then as he is sort of forced to face these creatures, whatever they may be, the zombies, and meeting people who are just ordinary people and don't treat him like a prince, I think he sort of learns the nobility of wanting to protect others in a different sort of way, if that makes sense, you know? It's a character arc. He goes from like doing it to uphold this princely vibe to like actually wanting to help people because he now knows people and understands people better. That's sort of the character arc I imagine he would go on. He does have the goal of wanting to reestablish the kingdom. Now, I don't know if anyone else did a royal character yet, so if they did, then I guess they're just related now, and that's just how that's gonna be. As for the age range of the character, I wanted to keep it quite vague because someone is drawing the love interest for this character, and I, of course, have no idea who that is yet, so I wanted to make sure if they drew a teen that this character could be a teen potentially, and if they drew an adult, then this character could be an adult potentially. So whatever the age of the love interest is, this character will be age appropriate. But for the design, I wanted him to look like he was once a very regal prince, but he's been through something now. So he's got like these old princely clothes that are now quite ripped up. This like pristine cape is all blood-stained, and he's got this like pieces of armor but not the full set, like it's gotten lost over time or damaged, and he can't replace it. I also wanted to put this scar across his face as sort of like a visual metaphor to symbolize that this sort of princely perfect character has this sort of chip or crack in it, and you know, a sort of physical representation of his fallen kingdom, you know. I imagine it would have happened like at the beginning of the apocalypse, whether it be from fighting off zombies or from escaping or the kingdom or something along those lines. And despite him being a fantasy character, I really wanted to keep with this sort of muted, darker colors that you see in a lot of apocalyptic stories and characters. But yeah, that's my fella. I'm so excited to meet the rest of his squad.
Hello, my name is Mari, and for this collab, I got the sidekick slash best friend character archetype. When it came to the character design, I knew that especially for sidekick, I wanted them to have rounder shapes, seem more friendly, seem approachable, because that's kind of their role in the story. And since we're doing high fantasy apocalypse, I really wanted to have some kind of like D&D class, so I ended up going for a bard, which is the friendliest to me. For their lore, I like to imagine that they grew up closely with the main character or protagonist of the story, was very supportive, and maybe had family run a nearby inn, and they maybe performed at it. Given they're a bard, they play some kind of instrument, which I did a violin, and I like to imagine their power and how they fight is also related to that specifically. I added some little doodles, and I know that they're in like a post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic world, but if they can get their hands on a drink, man, they're happy. Overall, they use their music to fight. They're doing their best to help other people around them, and specifically the main protagonist. And the name for this character is Gwen.
For this collab, I was given the love interest design. I thought a little bit about what is typical of a love interest character, and honestly, I usually get pretty sick of the flat tropes that are given to love interests. Where is the flavor? Imagine your partner just being a cardboard cutout. That'd suck. Oh. High fantasy apocalyptic world of zombies. To start out, I made some traditional sketches of the type of character I wanted to make before taking it over to my tablet to refine the concept. The idea bouncing around in my head was a neurotic yet kind character who wants to focus on healing others and helping out their friends. They spent their life alongside their father, who was a nurse, and tried their best to learn the trade from him. Although they're certainly not the best at it, they're trying their hardest and have a big heart. I decided to call this character the love interest Valentine. Corny for a love interest, I know, but it just felt right for them. I gave them some big old boots alongside with some clovey with heavy coverage. They know better than to be wearing something that could result in their demise from something as simple as a little cut. Plus some goggles for working on any healing that might be needed. You don't want some gross, nasty stuff getting splashed up in your eyes. Their unpredictable nature makes them someone that's fun for the protagonist to pursue, alongside the whole audience to witness. As you can see here, Valentine wears clothes that you would often attribute to someone like a priest or a plague doctor in high fantasy. I tried to combine these attributes to create them here. But here they are, ready to go!
So I got the privilege of doing the mentor for this video. So let's see what I came up with. I honestly just slapped on whatever I thought could work. I didn't know what high fantasy was, so I had to do some research on that and found out one of my favorite franchises, Fire Emblem, is considered high fantasy, so we're rolling with that. If it's not, my bad. I'm really bad at research. I decided to make them look like a mixture of a armored knight and a thief, since the concept seemed cool. And maybe they flexing on the fact they don't need a lot of armor, since most of the armor is just in the upper body, where like the vital areas are. They kind of look a little like my OC Ren. Oops, but we ignore that. The hair is up for a thief-like look, and the front hair is long, since I really like long front hair on a character. The long coat as well for the silhouette, and that's pretty much it for the outfit that I thought of. Colors, I just slapped on whatever colors I would like to add. Alright, so this is Archive. Literally, like, just Archive. I thought it would be a cool thing to name them. What's their gender? I don't know. They were a knight who isn't a knight anymore since the apocalypse hit. They took in the main character since they felt bad for them being alone and now mentors them to help them survive. They are very serious but still doesn't mind a bit of humor here and there. They aren't strict with the rules despite them being a knight. They aren't afraid to break the rules if it depends on their life. Their weapon is an axe. They used it as a knight and carry it now to survive since it's their preferred weapon. They know how to use other weapons but lean a little more to the heavy axe they've been using for a while. They had a crush or a thing with the villain at one point. It was pretty complicated, especially since they both had different ideals of what they wanted in life. This whole apocalyptic thing happened and bam, they separated and now walk different paths. I kind of like how it turned out, but you know, I'm scared to see how everyone's is gonna look all together, but let's just see how the others did and see if it matches the rest.
It began with the moon, a sudden flash and a change in hue. Freshly painted crimson, calling out for the Earth's extinction. It wasn't long before its call was answered. Brilliant red crystals began growing out of Earth's every pore. There wasn't a moment that red would escape your gaze. And yet, it was slow in its action. For months, the population as a whole remained largely unaffected, despite the changes. Then the signs began. People began to grow tired en masse, no matter their actions or amount of rest. Day after day, it slowly wore them down, challenging their very senses. Someone even claimed that the dirt beneath their feet would grab a hold of them, pulling them down. Among the population, there was a happy few. They remained unaffected from the growing madness. But what could they do? They were few and far between. All they could do was sit and wait, watching everyone around them slowly be claimed by the magic of the glow. How peculiar to have the time to contemplate the end of the world. And then everything snapped. All of the affected turned into something else, new and vile. The glow of their eyes matched that of the moon in its beautiful crimson light. With the world and most of its people turned to match its color, all that was left was to infect the survivors. Welcome to the apocalypse. Among these survivors was a member of the avian species, a vulture to be precise. For the past few months, it's focused on scavenging the many belongings left behind by the infected, avoiding the crimson gaze with ease. Alongside being a scavenger in the food chain, it had also grown a habit of being a scavenger of shiny little trinkets left behind by the infected. On one of its flights, it got a little too curious. Upon looking through a collection of goodies, it got a little too close to one of the red crystals. Tried as it would to retract, it got its neck wrapped around a cord, preventing the bird's escape. It eventually got itself free after a struggle, but it was already too late. The bird was infected. Due to its nature of long-term survival thus far, it fights off the infection, somehow retaining its own mind. But alas, it's only a matter of time till it too succumbs. And so, a new scavenger journey begins, looking for a cure. Along the way, it meets another survivor, the protagonist of our story, who gives this bird its name. But I don't actually know who the protagonist is, so let's just say this bird's name is Vulch. I know, it's creative, it's crazy, but crazy enough that it may just work. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, next person.
A world full of sickness, war, healthy versus sick. They're not zombies, not monsters, they're unwell. And there's only one person that's willing to help, not kill. Heya, I'm Oliver. I was tasked with making the anti-hero character in our little high fantasy apocalypse world. Emil, his name, according to this random website, means trying to equal in Latin. His goal in this world is to cure the world of the apocalypse through medicine and not assimilation. Emil was infected but found a fluke cure, which he is trying to replicate. His anti-hero plotline would be basically that he's experimenting on both sick and healthy individuals to find the cure to save the world. A good motive, but with unethical power behind it. Design-wise, I had a lot of fun working with his design. Whoa. I wanted to make him super angular and sharp, and I feel like I pulled it off well. From his nose to his overall shape, it's giving kind of triangles and almost teardrop shapes. When I think high fantasy, I think of things as rather medieval, so I used a lot of it, of inspiration from it when I came to the colors and also just the overall vibe of his character. So green is supposed to symbolize nature, wealth, and when I chose to really look for it, rebirth. And I think since Emil was infected and then healed, and then, all that rebirth and trying to create equality really suits him. Arguably, I wish that I included more red in his design. I think it's a good contrast in his facial area, but the green really takes over near his pants and feet. And finally, the last thing I'd like to really touch on is the over-exaggeration with a lot of his aspects. His lab coat was made super big and angular, same with his cane/syringe, which has some infection juices in it. I don't know how to explain it, but I liked kind of including the over-exaggeration of a syringe and making that as his prop kind of thing for a cane rather than anything. Either way, I really hope you like him because I certainly do.
Let's just say, when you're in an apocalypse, it is an excellent time to become a necromancer. Hello everybody, my name's Richard Rux, and I was given the role of the villain. Ooh, spooky, I know. And it turns out it's really hard to make villain characters. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I tried, and I struggled a lot. But you don't care about that, and instead I will tell you all about my character, the villain of this story. Styx. Styx was a normal girl in a normal fantasy world, except for the fact that she was trained in necromancy. Now, was she able to do necromancy? No. She had no magical abilities of her own, but she loved to learn about all different types of magic, even if she wasn't able to use it. Until one day, the end of the world started, and a magical gem practically rolled at her feet. Now, with the power source to harness her knowledge of magic, she has created an army of the undead that will listen to her every command. And then she uses said undead army for evil purposes. I haven't figured out all the kinks yet, but I think she's got a really cool design, and I'm really happy with how she turned out.
Hello, my name is Astar, and I was so excited to do this collab. The concept for the universe that all these characters would be in was so up my alley that I really just didn't have any trouble making this character at all, and it was just a really fun time. For the character that I was assigned, I got the villain's sidekick. There were two ways that I was considering doing this. The first one that I didn't end up going with was a younger character who kind of got pseudo-adopted by the villain. But I didn't really know what the villain would be like since we didn't have any communication. And I didn't want the villain to be some, like, genuinely evil slime ball and then have this, like, random child, like, be in their care. So I decided to go with my second option, which was a character who only joined the villain for their own personal gain. Now, in the world, it was said that this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, but I didn't really know how post-apocalyptic it would be, so I'm just gonna assume that the apocalypse happened somewhat recently. And before the apocalypse, this character was the head chef of the royal family. She ran the royal kitchen like the Navy. She was super strict on all her chefs, but she got everything done. She was truly the best of the best when it came to cooking, and she was highly renowned in multiple kingdoms. But when the apocalypse happened and the royal family was infected, there was nothing left for her to do. The one thing that she dedicated her entire livelihood to is now rendered pretty much useless. Her skills as a chef are still important for survivors, but she's more worried about surviving herself. Since this is a high fantasy world, I'm assuming there are magical creatures like elves and stuff like that who can do magic, but I wanted this character to be completely human. She has absolutely no magic, so when the apocalypse started, she knew that she was at a great disadvantage. And because of that, I'm assuming she joined the villain and became the villain's sidekick because she knew she was weaker than everyone else. She knew that the villain was strong, and she assumed that if she sided with the villain, that she'd have better chances of surviving. I assume her and the villain's relationship would be transactional in a way. She'd help do the villain's dirty work, and the villain would just not kill her and give her all the things that she needs to survive. Because of this, I wanted to make her super no-nonsense, very serious, just focused on her job. Back before the apocalypse, I assumed she became a cook because it was her passion, but because of the heavy workload, that passion was wiped away until it became just a job. And she probably sees working with the villain no differently. It's just another job so she can survive. As for her design, I pretty obviously just made her a chef. She probably fights the infected with oversized kitchen utensils and regular sized ones. She's pretty crafty with that. But something that I really wanted to include in her design was I wanted her to look very clean. You'd assume in the apocalypse she'd probably get dirty, bloody even, but all of her clothes are still very pristine and white. I think some of her professionalism and perfectionism from being a chef definitely lingers into the apocalypse, and something she does to keep herself sane in these times is to keep herself perfect. She takes extra precaution to not dirty her clothes, and after she uses her utensils to fight, she always cleans them thoroughly to make sure that they're sanitary. I think she probably does all these little tasks just to keep herself from going insane. But that is my character! I think she has a pretty good chance of surviving this story, but I guess I won't know until I see the other characters. Also, guys, I'm like praying and hoping that the villain is like an older lady so we can have old woman Yuri. Please, 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 please.
I don't know if you, the viewer, know this, but when deciding our character archetype, Storm asked us to make a top 3 so everyone was happy with their assignments. Well, I was super indecisive, so to get my top 3, I started jotting down some character notes I could build off later. I was pretty confident in my haunts the narrative idea, so I was glad that's what I was given. For those who don't know, haunts the narrative just means a character who's super important to the story, but we don't get to see them often, if at all. My first concept was a half-infected human whose appearance changed significantly after being infected. Damn it, this is bleeding into monster/infected territory. I realized this entirely too late, but that doesn't mean I can't redeem the character. I combined the traits that didn't overlap with another archetype with an idea I had at 3 AM one night. This is Astrid. She's a vigilante, and to give you a quick rundown of her backstory, let me read exactly how I wrote it down in my notes. Awesome lesbian couple. Evil and intimidating villains. Infects Geo. Angry lesbian. Seeks revenge whenever possible. You know how I said this was the entire backstory? This is all of the lore I had until really late into scripting, but I'll get to more character info later. I think the later stuff really helps develop her character. Because the chosen genre is high fantasy, I wanted to make a character more interesting than an average human. Sure, she's still humanoid, but that comes from before the concept change. Originally I was gonna make her all badass and edgy, but then I found this fun hairstyle. I thought being just a little bit girly while keeping the badass parts was a fun twist. But what does that have to do with anything else about her? And I'm thinking it's a relic of the relationship before the incident. What's it, you may ask? But with how I worded that sentence, now I'm thinking just the hair ribbon was given to her. I was originally gonna have her wield a big sword, but again, most of the rogue references had 2 daggers. I did a little bit of research, and a sword is actually possible for a rogue character, but I prefer the daggers. Because this is a more magic-based plotline, it would make more sense to have her use said magic. However, consider, being the one guy with swords in a magic fight is, objectively, raw as hell. If knowing magic is a requirement, I wouldn't have a problem imagining her use it. I'd say she's at least somewhat knowledgeable on the subject. This is my first time tackling fantasy clothes as well, so I had to rely on references pretty heavily. One problem, I was struggling to find images I liked. Eventually I had to take some creative liberties. To spice things up a bit, I want to try to make a connection to another character without knowing anything about them. I'm sure other people are doing that anyways. If Mari's character is single and sapphic, may I propose Fury? If the character doesn't fit, or Mari just doesn't want that for the Blorbo, I imagine the significant other character to be similar personality-wise to my first idea. So when I was thinking of ways to make Astrid more relevant to the story, I was thinking I could make Astrid herself more powerful. Then another idea I had was to make the girlfriend character more powerful. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for Mari's character. At some point, I realized the version of Astrid I had at the time didn't have as much going for her as I wanted. I gave the first concept hobbies and a personality before the infection, and the new one is lacking. Bullet points. Used to be more timid pre-infection. Knew she had to change. Even more shy before meeting love interest. Had a casual interest in weaponry. Started using it once other character gets infected. How'd they meet? It's blank. What does/did she like? That was my opportunity to give her hobbies. At some point I thought, but what if the relationship between the 2 characters were different? A sister, another family member, a best friend? Oh well, it's easier to make 2 unrelated characters lovers than family members. When I was thinking about the relationship between the 2 characters, I came up with the idea that she's an older sister. Oh, and this just touches on what I was talking about before. If Astrid has to put in so much effort to get her back when the main group of characters do it every so often, surely there's a reason that character is so hard to get. And that's when I realized, oh, because it's my first time writing a character this in depth and my first time tackling this archetype, I wanted to make sure she, actually haunts the narrative. I made a list of reasons I think she qualifies, but this is a deceptively hard trope to write for, especially when you don't know the other characters. Time and time again, she tries to confront the villains, but that's not... Actually, I wrote that, but if it's in the background, if the protagonist doesn't know, then you know what? It kind of is. Either way, I did say, as the potential solution, sneaks into the villain place pretty frequently. I might be extremely cooked here, because what small things could she do that massively affect the story? This is important. This is taken directly from the definition. My answer, fuck. This is important. Fuck. And then how can I make her more plot relevant? Above average power, and I've already explained like twice. Either or both could be big. Also, of course, grudge against villains. Hopefully this is fine, and hopefully I met all the criteria. This was way more difficult than I thought it would be, but in the end, I still like her. I don't think this came out exactly how I wanted it to, but I was doing a lot of new and challenging things here.
I was in charge of creating the infection for our cast to be at war with. Given the high fantasy prompt, my initial ideas were either fungus hive mind or that one snail parasite, which both of those seemed fun and all, and they probably would have made for some really sick designs, but if the idea here is that the cast is inherently going to be a little mismatched anyways, I wanted to throw a bit of a curveball and try something more unique. So say hello to Thermal Guy. That's it. That's literally my entire concept. You become the Thermal Guy. But let me explain. So the premise is that the heat death of the universe came early. Maybe one of the characters pissed off some incredibly powerful deity, or the end of the world is just the natural and inevitable progression of time. Either way, things are becoming very cold very quickly. And that's thanks to our infection, which essentially turns you into a heat-seeking zombie. When someone becomes infected, their main and only objective becomes to absorb heat. And I really mean absorb, because all of the heat within a general radius around them gets densely packed into their body and does not escape. At that point, the infected character would start to adopt that iconic thermal glow, and the coldest parts of their surroundings would become a deep blue to match. I think it would make for a really cool contrast between an environment that rapidly becomes increasingly colder and a figure at the center of it all that holds the heat of like a million suns. And here, I have a character displaying the stages of infection. She's a little gerbil girl! I'm thinking fully infected individuals will drop a molten residue that will contaminate others on contact. Since heat is a dying scarcity, I imagine it might be really tempting to touch said residue to experience warmth one last time. Which is probably what happened to my character. Maybe she was part of the main cast under their care, but slipped away one night and got herself infected. The infected themselves aren't very hostile or fast even, but the problem is that they're heat-seeking, and nearly every living being both emits heat and requires it to survive. In a world where temperature is dropping by the day, you'd probably need a campfire or two to survive. But the moment you start one up, it's basically gonna extend a beacon of an invitation straight to your camp to every infected within a 5-mile radius. I'd like to think that you could feel them before you see them. Like hours or even days in advance, the air gets suspiciously colder, and after a certain point, you and your squad realize that you need to pack your bags because you have a guest approaching from 20 minutes out. I don't exactly know what a counter to this would be. Being in the general vicinity of an infected risks immediate hypothermia, and even if you can get past that, any form of contact is gonna melt your arm off and probably infect or kill you. Your best bet would probably be to scatter around heat sources like fires in hopes that it'll distract them for long enough for you to find a temporary place to settle. But even then, unless the cast is particularly crafty and ambitious, I think I may have accidentally set up our world for a doomed end. I'm so sorry.
And this is the final lineup of all the characters. I'm so happy with how it turned out. I think they all look a lot more cohesive than I expected, to be honest. And we definitely all said some things that contradicted each other lore-wise, but that was 100% expected. But there was also so much that really fit together, which I thought was really fun. And it's very fun to try and sort of puzzle all the lore together, you know? Which is exactly what I did, and I would love to share with you how I think all these characters would fit together. The world is getting colder, and it's spreading. The royal court inside the castle walls are the last of the kingdom to be affected. Before the apocalypse, the prince has been an enjoyer of the fine things in life, including live music, and had hired a local talent to entertain him with their music, and that person was Gwen. Gwen sees the prince as a close personal friend, and the prince sees Gwen as entertainment at the beginning of the story anyway, and we get to see that relationship sort of develop through the prince's character arc. And then we have Archive the knight, who trained the prince and knows firsthand how unskilled and weak the prince is at fighting. So when the apocalypse started to infect the royal court and the rest of the royal family was infected, Archive took the prince in, and in turn Gwen, who was with the prince at the time the castle was taken over. After their escape, they come across a vulture, and the prince insists on helping it, as even birds are kingdom subjects and need to be protected. The crew over time both acquire and lose companions as the prince attempts to reassemble his fallen kingdom. One of these companions is Valentine, who has been on their own since their father got infected. They meet when the prince gets badly injured and the others don't know what to do, but they are lucky to run into Valentine, who is trained in medics and helps him. And surely this is the start of a romance plot. I'm not good at writing romance. Together, the team travel around and attempt to save as many people as they can, but through their travels, they begin to hear about a new kind of danger rising, an undead army taking over the kingdom, and Archive having a sinking feeling they know who is behind it. That person being Styx, who was studying magic in the royal court before the apocalypse, and had a bit of a rapport with Archive, but after they get separated when the royal court fell, Archive going to help the prince instead, Styx went on her own, where she was finally able to put her necromancy knowledge to use, taking previously infected people and bringing them back to life, in which they take on a new undead form. The royal chef, thinking the prince and the rest of the royal court was gone, teamed up with Styx, knowing the undead army would protect her. Styx uses the royal chef to do some of her dirty work for her, and in turn promises her a new kingdom will arise from the apocalypse in which she can resume her old lifestyle that she clings to. But this time, it will be a kingdom of the dead. And perhaps there's a little something between the royal chef and Styx. Wink wink. Meanwhile, Astrid, After being infected and fearing she can't return to her friends, is discovered by Emil, who offers her a possible cure. Astrid is the most successful experiment so far, but before Emil can do more studies on her, she slips away, horrified by the physical changes she has endured. She makes the realization that the combined efforts of Emil's cure, Styx's necromancy skills, and the humanity and unity our heroes have achieved in these circumstances could put an end to the apocalypse. So she attempts to converge these groups in secret. Emil attempts to track her down, same as our heroes, both finding trails leading back to the newly rising undead kingdom where all our characters are confronted with each other. And how the story ends, I don't know. That is up to you all. Please let me know how you think the story would go from there. And I would also love to hear if you have any differing ideas on how these characters could connect, or if there's anything you would add to my version, perhaps. I'd be so interested to see. I think there's so many different ways that these characters could connect with each other. This was just my version, or my initial thoughts. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much to all the artists involved. All of their links will be in the description below. Please go check them out. And also, thank you so much to my patrons, Jesse, T-Nancer, Jihet, and Jax. I appreciate you guys so much. If you join the Patreon, you'll get access to our exclusive Discord server, as well as sneak peeks to videos like this one. But that's all for this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!